So Einstein's theory was, number one, understand what's really going on. And he made the comment about science. He said, most of the time, we in science are solving problems that actually aren't the real problem. The interesting thing is what he said, he observed, it was the problem when we started, but everything's dynamic. Everything's constantly changing. And from the time that we started these experiments and this research, the variables have changed and it's no longer the problem. So you have to get off, as he said, the dance floor and stand on the balcony and see what's really going on in your life. We get people to look back on their life story and tell their story and see what's going on for you now. And then to work on defining what your purpose is. Second step in Einstein's formula. Discover the right question. One of his great quotes was that if I had to solve a problem in 1 hour and my life depended on the solution, I'd spend 55 minutes figuring out the right question. Once I've got the right question, I'll solve it in 5 minutes. I don't know about you, I'd probably need longer than 5 minutes, but I'm not Einstein. But the percentage is right. And in developing leaders, this is where the real action lies. He said, discover the right question. And this is exactly right. This is the real act of discovery. What's the problem we really have to solve here? Together. And he put it as a question, which means that there is a dialogue involved. There's a conversation involved. It's exactly what Søren Juhl did when he went down to the factory floor in Torslanda. He said, so what do you think? This is what's going on. How do we actually solve this? The fact is that most of the world that we live in and most of the problems that we encounter are so complex, you can't solve it yourself. You can only get there by conversation. Third step in his formula is develop visions of possibility based upon the big picture. And then evolve workable strategies, the execution phase. Steps 3 and 4 are obvious. We work with them all the time. The real genius of Einstein was in the first 2 steps. Seeing the big picture. Recognizing and seeing what's the choice we really have to make. And what's the conversation we really have to have. And in this, starting in this place with each individual, enabling them in their own context to find themselves, to establish their own point of view, to find their own ideology, to actually clarify their own values, then engage them in a conversation about the company's values and about the company's purpose. And you'll find that their level of commitment and engagement is massively higher because they can see themselves in this picture rather than just being spoken to by their dad. But mentoring and coaching is the work of the manager, is the work of the leader. What tends to become more diminished in this concept is controlling. It's not to say there's no control. Control is necessary, control is important, but it's got to be within the right context. The role of the manager as coach is new training. And the emphasis upon leading, and less so upon the archetypal role of managing, is built into this. But coaching and mentoring are basically the skills, the tools. The other training or new capabilities that you see managers adopting is in the art of conversation. Instead of telling, it's engaging in a conversation about what's going on. And we can't assume that people actually know how to do that. People either, because they've just been told, they just get used to telling others. They just don't know how to actually engage in a real, genuine conversation. And so training people in the art of powerful conversations, and particularly the art of difficult conversations, how do you actually do this, is critical training for the role of manager. And then the other things which are more institutional challenges is that it places a massive amount of emphasis upon defining outcomes clearly. being able to express clearly what good looks like. And you think that, well, managers, if they don't know how to set goals by this stage, what are they doing as managers? Well, you know what? Most of them are really shit at this. And in order for you to be able to bring into an institution or institutionalize the concept of paying for outputs rather than inputs and getting people to hold themselves responsible, you better have very, very good methods of defining the outputs that you're going to measure. And that people will measure themselves on, but they must be obvious, they must be concrete, they must be specific, and they must be achievable. You can't allow for woolly thinking in this. So precision of thinking is absolutely vital in it. Well, let me give you probably the answer you didn't expect. Working with females can be really a pain. But the qualities that what you were asking for, of what do you see in managers now, a much greater set of capabilities around collaboration, a much deeper set of capabilities and propensities towards cooperation, a more conversational form of communication, less telling, more, so what do you think? Without any doubt, women are better at this stuff than men. It also requires, in the coaching, mentoring framework of a manager's responsibility, you have to be prepared to spend a little bit more time than what us men are used to on dealing with a concept of conversation that doesn't have a beginning, middle and end. So therefore, okay, well then we've agreed then that this is what we will do. That's not the conversation that's important. The conversation that's important is one that continues on. Women are better at this than men. What we like, if I speak on behalf of my brothers in the room, we like really short conversations, particularly if it has anything to do with emotions or feelings. In fact, we'd rather not have those conversations. We like to deal with really practical, tangible results and outcomes. But it does require for a manager to be able to sit in and listen and actually get the outpouring of all of these things to be able to create a result. To be honest, women are at a better starting point than this. Not all. Some of them are really bad. Now, when you look at organizations that are largely driven by women, a few years ago we gave our IP for our leadership programs to the Girl Scouts in America, because we concluded that if we were to put our efforts in the one place that will make the biggest difference, who would you train in leadership and in our concepts that would have the biggest difference ultimately in civilization, in the world? What's the answer? Girls. You train girls in leadership that builds their self-esteem, makes them more actualized, and creates leaders out of girls. When they go into the community, that's where you'll get more bang for the buck. So we developed a very close working relationship with Girl Scouts of America. Well, let me tell you, this is an organization that's largely driven by women, and this is not a happy place. I mean, us guys have got our own toxic behaviors when it's in excess, but so do women. The extent of passive aggression, etc. You know, it's not actually a matter of gender. It's not men or women. Some of the worst examples of leadership I've seen expressed by women leaders. It's not gender. It's not male or female. But it is the emergence of capacities, capabilities, nuances, which are much more natural in a mother than they are in a father. That's absolutely for sure. And that partly says to me, yeah, absolutely, we've got to get more women into boards, into management. But that is, for me, it's a different subject to what you need to do in an organization where you want to delegate authority and really empower people and get decisions more distributed. You've got to have men start to act much more like mothers and a whole lot less like fathers. And you've got to have an ability to be able to deal with people at a genuine level of respect because that's who you are, not because of the position that you hold. And that's less about men and women, I think. This is the whole question of, can you change an organisation from the middle? I think you can change it in part, and I think you can change in the margin, but you can't change fundamentally. That's the truth. With regards to the leadership, though, I think that you've got to look for your opportunities. The idea that I've been put into this position because I've got the answer, because I'm being paid the big bucks, I've been put into this position, and here is the thing, now just go and do it. That really is an idea that is going rapidly out of fashion. And this is why you're seeing such a rapid turnover of people. I'll give you my own example of this with McDonald's. And I've got to say, as a precursor to this, I've been a vegetarian for 30 years. So if you see me being a little bit passionate about the McDonald's turnaround, it's more because of actually their social commitments rather than my infatuation with their product. But at the biggest crisis the McDonald's had in their history, and their third successive CEO in 12 months, Charlie Bell was a 40-year-old guy. He approached his first top 500 meeting. He'd just been appointed. He had people like Warren Buffett that were vehemently against his appointment because he was too young, he wasn't American, he didn't have any experience of the street. But he got the job because he had an incredibly deep passion and knowledge of the consumer and what happened in the restaurants. And in every meeting that McDonald's had ever had, every management meeting, the story was exactly like you said. The management would come along with their PowerPoint and they would spend the time occupying every bit of the time available with a PowerPoint saying this is what we're going to do. And at the end there would be like, well, are there any questions? Oh, well, yeah. And that was it. Biggest crisis in McDonald's history. The new CEO came in and he spent 10 minutes laying out a concept, no PowerPoint. He had his top 500 managers sitting in round tables, tables of 5. That had never happened before because they'd all been sitting in straight lines before. And they had paper on the tables. And basically, he didn't have a strategy. He didn't have a plan. He said, but we're going to have one by the time we walk out of here today. And they developed the plan to win, the top 500 managers together. He laid out a few principles of what he held to be important. And one of them was, although he didn't use this term, it was that we're going to do this together. And so he then said, are there any questions? And it was kind of funny because that's kind of like a joke in McDonald's, that you tell everybody the answers and then you ask if there's any questions. But that was after an hour and a half presentation. In this case, it was 10 minutes. And he said, so are there any questions? And they said, like we are going under here. Are there any questions? And the first hand that went up said, well, yeah, Charlie, what are you going to do about our image problem? And it was going down. But you would never, ever, ever suggest that there was anything wrong with the system, the menu or anything else. But it was obvious that they had lost touch with the consumers. There were concerns that consumers would have that you couldn't talk about within McDonald's. But he was the guy that many people thought, here's the guy that could change it. And the very first question, he fell. So what are you going to do about our image problem? He looked at this guy and he said, we don't have an image problem. And everyone went, oh. He said, Larry, we've got a reality problem. In fact, we've got a big, fat reality problem. We have a business which is based upon products which make people fat. Our business is about hamburgers, French fries, and Coca-Cola. And we are in an environment in which people are concerned about obesity and are concerned about nutrition. That's the reality. And people almost, I thought their heads were going to explode. Because they had never heard such obvious truth that was told right from the front of the room. And he said, you know what? I don't think it's completely true that we are responsible for the world's obesity crisis. I don't think that it's totally true and fair to say that McDonald's is responsible singly for the destruction of the Brazilian rainforests. I don't think that we are wholly at fault in causing the world's nutrition problems. But that's the wrong conversation. Because I can tell you right now, from this moment on, we are going to be part of the solution. And in that moment, that became the mission of this company. That became the rallying cry that said, this is why we are here. And no longer are we going to be ashamed to say that we work at McDonald's. And I don't know what it'll be. We have no idea what it's going to be. But I know that we will be selling more of it than any other institution on earth. And they did. They went from selling no salads to being the biggest marketer of fresh produce in the world, the biggest marketer and grower of free-range eggs, etc. Now, I'm not becoming a McDonald's apologist. They still have got a whole lot of shit wrong with them. Was that they went into a conversation with the 500 most important people in the company. And they developed a plan. Was it a perfect plan? Absolutely imperfect. But it was one that they owned. But more importantly than that, what they did, they went back to their regions and they did the same thing. And those regional managers then went back to their divisions and they went back to their countries and that started a global dialogue. And it got people actually engaged. And that's what leaders do. And I don't know if any leaders in Mexico will do it. Do you think? No one will? I don't know. Someone will. And then it'll start something new. And leadership is not for everybody, to be perfectly frank. Leadership is really just a handful of people that make the biggest difference. And for all of those hundreds and thousands of CEOs or leaders of companies that will never ever do this, there will be one. Then there will be another that will do it. And those will be the ones that will make the biggest difference. And those will be the ones actually that can change the trajectory of our civilization. And only business will be able to do that.
Also, I just want to thank Brian to be with us. He just made this trip to Monterrey for this, and had a chance to speak with Salvador Alba. So the important guys were you yourself, and he just had to take another plane, go back to Mexico City for breakfast tomorrow morning. So I would like to give you a big applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much.